Please welcome Ramses Jean-Louis, HBA Global Board of Directors.
Good afternoon, HBA. Hasn't this been an absolutely amazing and inspiring afternoon so far? What a powerful message from our Women of the Year. And to be honest with you, I was a little nervous having to come on stage after the Women of the Year. If you spend too much time with Mary and the HBA, they will convince you that you can do anything. I warn you now. So here's the deal that I made. I said I will only come out on stage if I could bring all of them back on stage with me to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So can we have another round of applause for our honorees? We will have Dr. Loddie, no boxes, Foose. We will have Rick, I see you, I believe in you, and you are ready for more, Winningham. And Dr. Aradhana, don't just lead, but make sure you do better, and it makes sure everybody around you do better as well. Sarin, please, come on out. Please, have a seat. So we have a QR code up. Please use that QR code so you can submit your questions, and the questions will pop up here. So as you're thinking of your questions, we're going to jump in because I have a question of my own. I think, one of the themes we heard is that, you can't get there alone. It takes a village. And it's obvious that all of you have done a fantastic job mentoring, coaching, and sponsoring others. What I would like to hear is who coached and who sponsored you. Now, Rick, I know your wife's in the audience. I know she's your number one mentor. If you could raise your hand for a moment. You did a great job. You did a great job. Loddie, we'll start with you. Who mentored you, and also how were you able to build that relationship authentically?
So mentorship, I think, has come most powerfully in the form of other women. And the relation just starts really simply. You ask a question because you think someone's amazing. So you go up and say, how did you get where you are? And what are the things that I can do to actually start to build some of that in myself? And what's amazing is, like I said earlier, we actually serve as mirrors for one another. So sometimes it's hard to see our own potential. But when you see someone who's unlocked theirs, they actually can more easily see that potential in you and reflect it back to you. And I will be honest, in terms of sponsors, because there are so many male executives, my most powerful and frequent sponsors have actually been male executives. It's actually one of the current CEOs, I won't say what company, who told me to join the HBA in the first place, and has also been a Woman of the Year in the past. So we all elevate each other, whether it's advice in passing moments, or whether it's in more long-term relationships. And every conversation you have, you are being noticed. So let people notice you and let them do their job of sponsoring you. Because sponsors, and I know that the executives on this stage would say this, they are sponsors because they are hungry to get the best talent into all the seats that can have an impact. And that's you. You are those people. Don't doubt it.
Thank you. Rick.
Well, I think, I've been unbelievably fortunate to have a lot of different mentors. And I think what drove it was curiosity. Why does this work this way? Why do you do this way? And it generally was in areas outside of where I started, which was sort of in finance and accounting and statistics. It was in, clinical science or in clinical development, or, how different assays and research worked. And it was just by being curious. And I was fortunate, I don't know whether it was random or what, but that by being curious, people took an interest in me. I was interested in what they were doing, so they became interested in what I was doing, and they began to help me and and I mentioned this in my remarks, to speak up for me when I wasn't there. if there was a particular job that needed to be done or something like that. And as I look back, I think it's being curious. That's what enabled me to have fantastic mentors.
That's powerful. The idea and the concept of who's advocating for you when you're not in the room. Thank you for that. Aradhana.
So I didn't have sort of one specific mentor. I think given I spent 2 decades in investment banking, first of all, there weren't a lot of women to begin with, right? I think at the senior level it was less than 0.5%. But I think I learned from different people, different things. So almost having multiple different, you could say, mentors, but not really formal mentors. But I'd also say I learned equally from bosses that were bad and things not to do as I moved up the food chain. So I learned from both people who were good in different fields as well as bosses who were very bad.
So you learned what not to do. Understood. Thank you. What's a decision you made that looked small at the time, but completely changed your trajectory? Rick, we'll start with you.
Small at the time. Well, I think it was probably making a decision to go to work at Bristol Myers at the time. I was working for Price Waterhouse, and I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and I thought, well, maybe end up going to work for Bristol for a couple of years and then do something else. I wasn't that crazy about it, but again, back to my lifelong mentor, she thought it would be a great idea, and so I didn't expect to spend 15 years there. I didn't expect to learn what I had learned there, but yet, it was seemingly a small decision. It wasn't a decision I was like 100% in, but it made my life. So that's just how things go.
Thank you. Aradhana.
I think I'll probably both those questions. I think it was a separate question that came up. So I transitioned from being a physician to going into finance. And the reason I think that pivot happened, so I loved learning medicine. I loved studying medicine, but once you start practicing medicine, it's actually quite different. 80–90% of the time you're seeing the same types of patients, and there are all these other constraints. And I think that's actually a lot of the reason why people who are really good in clinical medicine actually join companies to help develop drugs and so forth. I didn't know that was a choice, obviously, at the time. And I didn't know what else to do. My brother was at Columbia Business School at that time, and after a few years of practicing medicine, I was thinking of what else to do. He said, well, why don't you go to business school? So I said, okay, and I applied to half a dozen business schools and ended up at Stanford. When I joined business school, I actually had not done math for almost 10 years. So it was a very steep learning curve, learning economics, macroeconomics, microeconomics, finance. I ended up loving finance and then obviously majored in it, and then went to Wall Street, where also nobody wanted to give me a job on Wall Street. So, but I think it's all these pivots in life that happened, and like I said, you can only connect the dots going back.
Loddie, how about yourself?
So when I said earlier about the operations role I was excited about, I was making an intentional decision to stay in the Southern California area because at the time my first daughter was born, and also my mother was battling stage 3 breast cancer, and so I wanted to be local for family. And so that actually is why I took that operations role. But it ended up with that small decision of, well, this company is local and I'm getting this job offer. Within 6 months, because of a major compliance investigation, that I was a part of the team for, the head of quality actually put me in charge of that investigation. And it had C-suite visibility, and I definitely did not expect that in my 20s. But it's those types of opportunities where you just listen to your instinct, your intuition, your gut, whatever you want to call it, and you follow that path, and really unusual things end up happening. And I've found that over and over in life.
Next question for you is, what is some advice that you've received that you're actually really glad that you ignored? Aradhana, I start with you.
Well, so every year I used to get feedback. I shared this yesterday in the group. You're doing great, you know, you're very capable, but you're very direct. And that was a problem in a client service business, because, you know, clients always right and so forth. And while I tried to improve that, you know, some things fundamentally, I guess, very difficult to change. I guess I'm still glad I'm just as direct now as I was then.
Rick, how about yourself?
Well, when I became CEO of the company that's now Theravance, and we had a little bit of money, very few people, and some early research programs, got through my first board meeting, and one of the investors, a noted investor in biotech, came up to me and said, if you don't kill this program in research, you're not going to be CEO very long. They just sort of patted me on the shoulder and walked out. And fortunately, we made progress on that program, and that program really turned into a set of expertise and became, you know, by far the most valuable program the company ever worked on, and has now resulted in 3 major drugs that are on the market. And you know, I think about that a lot, because, you know, he had good reasons. This was hard. You know, it was hard, but if we could accomplish it, and I thought we had some unique insight. If we could accomplish it, it would be very valuable for patients, and that's ended up being what happened. So.
And I felt as if you've answered that question. I remember you were talking about the fact that you were told if you take this role, it'll be a demotion, but you did it anyway. So I'm glad that you did that. I'll ask you another question that we got in from the audience, which is, what is one thing you are doing now to keep learning and growing?
Oh, I love this one. Anytime something makes me nervous, if my first reaction is, oh my God, I couldn't do that, I actually go make myself do it. So that's how I ended up taking Taekwondo. I was, yes, really, I had taken my younger daughter to classes for Taekwondo. I saw adults doing it, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I could never do that. And I said, oh, now I've got to take Taekwondo. It just pushes the boundaries of your comfort zone until there's no boundaries left, and you realize actually you can do anything.
Thank you. All right, we have another question that popped up. This will be our last question. When you meet high potential talent, what signals tell you they're ready for the next level, even before their CV shows you it? Rick.
Generally, problems, you know, one, they carry with them a degree of humility, and two, that they're problem solving. You know, what sort of problem have they encountered along the way that they've solved that tells me, you know, that problem solving skill, that humility can, you know, enable them to lead people to, you know, solve bigger and bigger problems. But humility is really important, and, you know, a history in facing difficult problems and solving them.
Thank you. Aradhana.
I have nothing to add to Rick's. It's absolutely right.
Absolutely. Loddie, anything to add?
I mean, that deep curiosity, I think you can be anywhere in the organization, but think like the CEO, right? So when people ask questions that make it clear they've tried to step back and better understand the context in which they're working, those are the ones to watch.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause for our honorees. And let's give yourself another round of applause. When you're standing on stage and you're looking out into this room, it looks absolutely amazing. As Mary mentioned earlier, this is our first time in San Diego in the West Coast, and to see all of this energy, this talent, this grace, is very inspiring. So thank you all for being here.
Woo!